Muammar Gaddafi, the former Libyan leader, was known for his fiery and often controversial speeches that touched on a wide range of political, social, and ideological issues. Some of his most famous speeches were given at the United Nations General Assembly and in Libyan national addresses. Here are a few of his most notable. This speech was Gaddafi's first and only appearance at the United Nations General Assembly. It was notable not only for its content, but also for its length and delivery style. Speaking for over 90 minutes, far beyond the allotted 15-minute limit, he covered a broad range of issues. Gaddafi openly criticized the UN, especially the Security Council, which he called the Terror Council. He argued that the structure of the UN was inherently unjust, allowing only a few powerful nations to dominate world affairs. He advocated for reform, calling for a true United Nations where all countries, regardless of size or power, would have an equal voice. He heavily criticized the United States and other Western nations for what he saw as imperialist and exploitative policies, especially regarding their involvement in the Middle East. Gaddafi accused these countries of double standards, pointing to conflicts like Iraq and Afghanistan. Gaddafi suggested a series of unconventional ideas to foster global peace, including relocating the UN headquarters from New York to a more neutral location. He also proposed that smaller countries should be able to host the UN to prevent influence by powerful host nations. Gaddafi often spoke at African Union summits, where he promoted his vision of a United States of Africa. He saw himself as a leader not only for Libya, but also for the African continent, and frequently pushed for policies that would make Africa more self-sufficient. Gaddafi advocated for a unified Africa, free from Western influence and exploitation. He suggested a single African government, currency, and military. His vision of a united Africa was rooted in the idea that collective power would better protect African nations from foreign exploitation and neo-colonialism. He encouraged African nations to develop their own infrastructure, such as transportation and communication systems, rather than relying on foreign aid or investments from Western countries. Gaddafi emphasized that Western aid often came with strings attached, which he believed kept African countries economically and politically dependent. Gaddafi proposed the creation of an African military to protect the continent from external threats and internal conflict. This idea was aimed at reducing African reliance on Western military intervention, which he argued was often driven by ulterior motives. In 2008, Gaddafi delivered a speech on direct democracy and the Green Book philosophy. Gaddafi's political philosophy was laid out in his Green Book, a three-part manifesto in which he outlined his beliefs on democracy, economics, and social issues. In various speeches, he promoted his idea of Jamahiriya, or state of the masses, a system he claimed to be a form of true democracy. Gaddafi argued that traditional representative democracy did not truly represent the people's will. Instead, he proposed a system of direct governance where Libyan citizens participated in decision-making through a series of people's congresses and committees. He believed that representative systems led to corruption and a concentration of power among elites. His Green Book also proposed an economic model that rejected both capitalism and socialism. Gaddafi argued that workers should directly control their workplaces, and he opposed the idea of a wage system because he believed it led to exploitation. Gaddafi also addressed topics such as women's rights, personal freedom, and social justice. In his speeches, he asserted that his government provided equality and freedom for all Libyan citizens, contrasting this with Western societies, which he argued were hypocritical in their treatment of minorities and women. In 2011, as the Arab Spring swept across the Middle East and North Africa, Gaddafi faced growing opposition within Libya. In February 2011, he delivered a memorable and defiant speech promising to hunt down the rebels Zenga, or Ali by Ali. Gaddafi accused the rebels of being backed by foreign powers intent on destabilizing Libya. He vowed to fight until the end, urging his supporters to take up arms and defend the country. He used strong emotional language to galvanize his loyalists, calling on them to defend Libya from internal traitors and external forces. His words resonated with supporters who saw him as a symbol of Libyan sovereignty. The speech gained widespread attention, especially online, where it was remixed into a viral internet song. This Zenga remix gave the speech a surreal legacy, turning it into a meme while also symbolizing the resilience and resolve he attempted to convey. Throughout his rule, Gaddafi gave numerous speeches condemning Western powers and their involvement in the Arab world. He framed his leadership as a defense of Libya's resources and sovereignty against foreign exploitation. Gaddafi frequently called out Western countries for their history of colonialism and their ongoing efforts to control the Middle East and North Africa through economic and political pressure. He argued that these countries only intervened in the region to protect their interests and gain access to resources like oil. He promoted Libya's development projects, such as the Great Man-Made River, a massive water pipeline intended to turn Libya into an agricultural powerhouse. Gaddafi highlighted these projects as proof that Libya could thrive without Western aid. Gaddafi often claimed that Western media spread misinformation about Libya and its government to justify intervention. He accused Western journalists of bias, alleging that they portrayed him as a dictator to turn public opinion against his government and pave the way for foreign intervention. Gaddafi's speeches were polarizing and complex. While many dismissed him as a dictator, his rhetoric often resonated with audiences opposed to Western interference and sympathetic to anti-imperialist causes. His 2009 UN speech and the Zenga speech in 2011 became especially iconic, showcasing both his defiance and his unique worldview. His speeches frequently expressed frustration with global power imbalances and a vision for a unified, self-sufficient Africa free from outside control.